Hi everyone, we're back here with this same data as the first video, and in this video I'm going to show how to take one data set and manipulate other data sets with it. And not only that, but we're also going to look at this boundary layer that has multiple different components going on with it, and we're just going to isolate out the main, I guess is the core boundary or the city limit, official city limit boundary of Corvallis. Then we can look around and see what these other extended areas are as well. So when you have a shapefile like this with an attribute table, that's where all the information about what you're looking at is. So for the layer you're working with, right click on it, go down to Open Attribute Table. And we'll see here that there's a variety of bits of information. Some of it's sort of automatic or default data, like things like the acreage and whatnot. These with the shape area, shape length, these are all auto-generated by when shapefiles are created. But what we do have here is under boundary, we have city limit. And that's what we're going to use to limit our elevation data and our fire district data. So this is a pretty straightforward, clean example of taking one layer's boundary file. Maybe it's if you're doing a research project, maybe it's your area of interest, or maybe you're doing forest restoration, or maybe you're working with U.S. Census data and you want to look at very specific blocks or tracts. You can isolate those out and then use those boundaries to then isolate out other data. To get a visual of what you're looking at, if you click at the very far left, then it will highlight, let's bring that back. There we go. So this orange area is the city limit. So we can tell that by, it's highlighted and it's what I selected along the column. You can select multiple things. If you hold down Control, I could even select all of them. If you hold down Shift and then click the last one, it will select all of them. A couple little hotkey tricks there. But yeah, here's the city limit. So I'm going to isolate this data out as a brand new vector shapefile. And then I'm going to use the new layer I'm about to create to then isolate out the fire districts and the dim elevation data. So that will then result with fire district data that matches this yellow area. The yellow area itself will be the city limits from the boundary file, and then we'll clip out the dim as well. So with this selected, what I want, actually let me go back. I'm going to just bring up one other thing. I'm probably not going to make a video on this. Sometimes these get really complicated, or sometimes you have thousands of features. Each one of these is a feature. So sometimes you have thousands of them in a single file, single shapefile. There's this select features using expression option. Look like this, and you can build up a query that then you can select stuff. Whatever you want, because sometimes you maybe want, maybe you got a bunch of lakes and you want all the lakes that are bigger than 5 acres, or maybe you have, well, actually, it's very common for my work that you end up with a national hydrology data set. You have a whole bunch of polylines that represent rivers and streams and creeks, and maybe you want to select the Willamette River. The Willamette River is like 1,200 little polyline segments. So you definitely don't want to manually pick all those, because it's, it'd take forever and you're probably going to make a mistake and miss something. So that's what this is really great for, this little query tool. You can build up an expression of what you want. So just throwing that out there. But yeah, we have the city limit here, so I can close this now. I don't need that. And once I have what I want selected for anything you're doing in QGIS, when it's already pre-selected like this, you can right click on the layer. This is the boundary layer in this case. You can go export. If I do save feature as, it's just going to make a copy essentially of all the data. But if I say save selected feature, it's going to then create a new shapefile of only the selected features that are currently selected. Format shapefile is fine, though there is some other options. GeoPackage is a pretty common one also for GIS data. It works really well here in QGIS. A bunch of these other ones I don't know if I'd really recommend for at least basic GIS. I'm just looking through and make sure that key markup language, that's an older format but works really well with Google Earth data. And then the JSON ones are pretty standardized as well. But I'm just going to stick with the shapefile. And then I'm going to navigate to my project. And I'm going to make a new, just to keep this clean, I'm just going to call this my data, meaning this is what I made. Sometimes I call this like processed or something like that. And what it is it's my city limit. So I'm going to call it city limit, save, and then I'm going to run it. There we go. Now it exported just that layer. So this layer here, if I turn off boundary, we'll see it's only this red part, which maybe that's already obvious. But all those other boundary layers that were the outer area are now all gone. I was going to look and see what this broader area beyond Corvallis was. So it's a little side detour. If you want to explore data in a spatial sense, there's this identify features, the little blue circle with the eye. So if I select this tool and click, it's popped up on my other screen, but there we go. So then it actually clicks and highlights. So this is a UGB mass graphic. I don't know, it's just something apparently beyond the boundary. I'm not sure what this means, but it doesn't appear to have anything to do with the city. Let's select this one up here, this upper area of the city. Urban growth boundary. So that's just the urban growth boundary beyond the official city limits. So. But at this point, I don't need this boundary layer, so I'm just going to remove it. Okay. And the goal here then, as a reminder from the last video, all of our coordinate reference systems all match, and I got rid of the data that they do not match. We're working in this 2913, also seen down here in this lower corner, which is Oregon North. And you want all that set up to prevent any problems. Sometimes things work fine if your coordinate reference systems are a little off. Sometimes like the datums match and that's all that matters. So you kind of get lucky, but really it's best to just make them all match to prevent any problems, which is what we did in the prior video. And so here what I'm going to do is this purple boundary is my fire district boundary. I'm going to clip the purple boundary using the red, which is now my city limit. And I'm also going to clip the elevation data to the city limit. Then I'll end up with two new file formats, and with all the city limit data all matching the city limit layer. So let's start with the vector data. Really, this process for the rest of this video is the same, but it's different tools depending on if you're working with the vector data, aka shapefiles, or if you're working with the raster data. So let's start with that fire district boundary, this purple one. So vector, I think it's under geoprocessing clip. So this clip tool, I like thinking of this like a cookie cutter. So the purple is like the laid out dough, and then you're going to cut out the shape of whatever the cookie is, which is in this case the city limit. So this is what this clip tool is going to help us do. So the input layer, again, that's the layer we want to clip from. That's correct, that's the fire district. But the overlay layer, or the thing we're clipping, or the boundary we're clipping to, is actually our city limit. So I'm going to fix that. And then I'm going to save this to a file in my project, my data. So this is the fire district city limit. There we go. Oh, limit. There we go. So now that this is a pretty simple tool, now that this is filled out, just run it. There we go. Turn off my fire district, and now we'll see the purple's gone. If I turn off the city limit, there is my fire district. And let's see what these are. So if we go into the attribute table, a bit encryptic. I'm sure these mean a lot if you're part of the city, or especially if you're one of the firefighters. I don't know what these codes are, but there they are. So these are the districts by these numbering system, and there they are. When you have something highlighted like this, sometimes you need to get rid of it. Up here, you need to find this deselect feature. It's the yellow squares with the crossed out no in red. That will clear anything you have selected. And so there's our fire districts cut down to our city limit. So next, we're going to then cut down the elevation data. So before I went vector, geoprocessing clip, that was for the vector data. This time, a very similar process, but it's going to be under raster, extraction. And there's two options, extract by extent versus extract by mask. I'm going to use the mask tool because that's a little bit more interesting. But the extract by extent tool, it's going to, just think about it as like the max north, south, east, west dimensions of the data. So the select by mask is going to actually cut out the data so it matches this red boundary. That is our, well actually, we're using the city limit. Let me change that. There we go. We don't want to, you could use the fire district, but we're going to be consistent, stick with the city. So the tool I'm going to use is going to make it actually match the orange bounds of the data, versus the extent tool would end up with a very large square of the same overall extent, but won't perfectly match the detail of this odd boundary. So let's go back to that. Clip raster by mask layer. My input is my dim. That's the thing I want to clip to. I want to use my city limit to define the boundaries. My EPSGs all match, so I don't need to worry about my coordinate reference systems. And the output data will be the same as the input. In this case, the input means the raster layer. So it will still be the float 32. I think there's one. I'm not seeing it. Maybe we're fine. We'll see if this works. So then finally, I'm going to save this to a file location under my data, dim at 3 meter city limit. I'm going to stick with TIFF, that top option, GeoTIFF or TIFF, and then hit run. There we go. So you see this black area. Actually, let me get rid of the original dim. And we're going to turn off our city limit there. There we go. Zoom in a little now that we're working with a smaller area. So this is what I was talking about. So now it extracted out the real elevation data where there was a city limit. Very interesting that there's these little pockets. Curious what all those are. But ignoring those, everything that's black is what's called no data, or in this case, it got set to 0. So that was just areas beyond. There are ways in the tools that you can define specific types of no data values. You can also, in the symbology, see if we can do that real quick. The symbology we can set, see, I'll do sudo, where is the, if I can't find it quickly, I'm not going to bother, but I will tell you that somewhere here, and it might be deep in the settings, you can clip out of range values. Is that it? You can tell it that to ignore, like this is no data, don't show it. Let's see. Well, that worked. So I said to clip out of bounds. This isn't the thing I was considering or looking for. I know it's here though, somewhere in these settings. But this worked. So basically I said, you know, any values beyond this range that I am defining, don't show them. That's a similar approach to the same problem. So here we have I told it the minimum was 50, maximum was already preset. And so then it's now no longer showing those boundaries beyond that. This video is about pretty short, so I'm going to show one more thing, and that is basemaps. A few different ways of doing basemaps. These, I prefer, they're so-called XYZ tiles. You could just Google QGIS XYZ tiles, and there's a lot of websites that can help you with this. These you have to add explicitly, so you have to create a new connection. I did that by right-clicking, make a new connection, and then you have to fill this out. The most important thing being the URL. Very, very syntax specific. You have to get this perfect or it's just not going to work. But a lot of websites out there to help you figure out what these are. I've already pre-made some here. So I'm going to, I just double clicked on Google Maps. And you can see it then added a Google Map layer. Always adds them on top, which is a little frustrating. One thing I like in ArcPro always adds basemaps to the bottom. But easy enough to fix. I'll just drag it down so it's on the bottom. And then we can see our elevation data, or we can turn on our fire districts. Actually, let's go with the clipped fire districts and see their dimension and boundary. Basemaps, FYI, you can't do anything with them. They're just an image. They're just being uploaded from a server. I can't manipulate them. I can't clip them. I can't change them. I can't do anything with them. So that's one reason I don't like them so much, because for me, in GIS work, it's all about manipulating the data to produce a certain map product or a certain type of analysis. But I do use basemaps on occasion just to make sure my data is correct. They also are nice if you're making a map and you want to represent what is beyond. You know, here if our map was the fire districts, it would be nice to see what we're missing. You know, people might assume that the golf course off beyond the city limit, you know, would be part of the fire district, but apparently it's out in, I'm assuming, county land. Also interesting, looking up here to the north, that the, where's the, oh, it's barely in the bounds. Okay. I was seeing some verbiage regarding the hospital, but the hospital is right on the edge, which makes more sense. So. Yeah, so they're a great reference, and they normally work pretty well. But let's go back over here. So if you went with the XYZ tile, you know, this is what it would look like. I named this Google Map, but then I went and found this this web link, and you know, highly recommend probably just cut and paste, because this is exactly what it needs to be. And a couple of little settings if you could play with, but otherwise really those first two are the only that matter to just get it working. I'll show you here too the satellite one, how the URL code is quite different. Besides this, another option is directly through QGIS. Up here you probably don't have this if you have not went through these steps. I'll show you the steps here in a minute. But under web, I have under Quick Map Service, this OSM is their standard maps. And I just added it. And so looks a little different. All these base maps are all going to look a little different depending on their source. But that's another nice, pretty easy option. And to get this, or many, many other things in QGIS, QGIS has what's called plugins, which are basically people have wrote various types of plugins that you can access. Oops, there we go. Here are some of the ones I have installed. You know, for like the quick map service, I would say quick as a filter, quick map, it's already here. I already have it installed, but if you didn't, there would be, instead of uninstall plugin, there would be install plugin. Oh, looks like I should upgrade though. Maybe I'll do that while I'm here. There we go. And then you'll have it available. And as soon as you've installed this, then you would have this quick map service option. You might already have the web, but you don't have the quick map service. So. And there's a whole bunch of other plugins too, many different plugins. The only warning I'll have about plugins is that they are, some are not maintained. You know, a great example is maybe a graduate student for their work writes a plugin and then shares it with the world. That's great, but then they move on, and then so that means that whatever version of QGIS was available at the time is what they wrote the plugin for, and then future versions of QGIS may or may not work with that plugin. It just depends on the plugin itself and what it does exactly. A nice thing though, FYI, is unlike ArcPro, you can install every different version of QGIS that's ever been made, and they have an archive, QGIS does at their website, and I've done that before where there was a plugin that did exactly what I needed, but it didn't work in my version. So then I looked at the plugin, figured out what version, this installed version here, this is the up-to-date, but it might say some prior version. You can go find it, install that version of QGIS. You don't need to uninstall your current, most latest version. It does mean though that if you want to use that plugin, you have to use that older version of QGIS. But, minor price to pay for being able to access some really cool plugin that does exactly what you need. So, so thanks. Again, just quick recap here. It was just a quick video on generating a boundary, using that boundary to extract some raster data and to clip to a vector data set, and then lastly also a little bit about Basemaps. Thanks.